What's up? It's Canucks this week. Dan, Rachel, and Randip Janda. Yes, another week in Canucks land. And that means what crisis are we going through this week, Randip? And it's really all on the president, Jim Rutherford, who shocked the world with an incredibly honest mid-season State of the Union. What was your reaction to everything the president said the other day?
Well, Dan, you know how we love The Godfather here on YouTube with the Canucks this week.
Yep.
That press conference by Jim Rutherford earlier this week was like the final scene of Godfather 1, where Mo Green got one, Don Barzini got one, everybody got a shot from Michael Corleone. And that's exactly what happened with Jim Rutherford. He was holding no punches. He was shooting straight from the hip. And it was a little bit of everything. It was Bo Horvat talk, Andrei Kuzmenko talk, and the coach talk, the coach that is still currently coaching the team, and potential successor talk in regards to that too. It was a lot of conversation and a lot of conversation about the future. I love the honesty, but it was a shocker.
Well, we definitely love the honesty, especially in our business. We'll definitely take it compared to the old cliches we often get, or even the cliches we get from Patrick Allvin, the general manager of the Vancouver Canucks, a lot of the time. But Jim Rutherford said a lot, and maybe sometimes you don't want or don't like hearing that as a fan. And you don't need to know the whole plan. People have been asking to hear about the plan, but now they don't like the plan, Randy, because Jim Rutherford yet again doubling down and saying, while we may need major surgery, it is more of a retool than a rebuild here in Vancouver. And sure, use whatever verb, whatever word you want to use to describe it: retool, refresh, rejig. You can use all the things that you want. I don't care. Fix it. That's the biggest thing that matters here. They've barely made any moves. They haven't made the big core changing move that they've been talking about since day one that Jim Rutherford came in here. And realistically, like, I know because of the way the season has gone and where they are, people seem to think that everything needs to go. You can't keep anybody here in Vancouver, and that's wrong. Why would you trade Elias Pettersson? He's a top 15 center in the league. Why would you trade a potential Norris Trophy defenseman in Quinn Hughes? Yeah, he's not playing at that level this year, but we know he could play at a top 10 level in the league and maybe even has some potential to grow up into the top 5 and have those types of seasons where he is a top 3 kind of guy. I still believe in that with Quinn Hughes. You want to put everybody else on the table? Go ahead. But those two guys are absolutely untouchable, and they should be players you can build around. You tell me you can't, I would see that as a defeatist mentality, and I wouldn't want to cheer for an organization that thinks that way.
Okay, from a conversation perspective, like Elias Pettersson, Quinn Hughes, I don't even understand, and I'm sure you're getting this on the airwaves on Sportsnet 650 with Canucks Central, and those texts are coming in, but it doesn't make sense to me. Why would you get rid of a franchise centerman and a franchise defenseman? So that does not compute with me. It does not compute up here. The second thing is, if you're keeping these guys, which you should be, and which they probably will, because they are the two untouchables from what we hear, especially Elias Pettersson, Quinn Hughes, it would take a monstrous offer to even have the Canucks to consider the alternative. You also have to provide some hope for these guys, especially Elias Pettersson and where he's at with his contract. He's on a bridge deal. He's going to make a lot of money. You have to sell hope. So yes, you have to make a lot of changes around the team and make sure that you're able to, build around these two guys, but you also have to sell a plan and sell hope to them specifically to say, hey, this is a spot for you, and this is where the team will become a winner. And the Canucks haven't been able to do that from what we know externally anyways. And if you look at what's the product on the ice, Dan, yes, Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson are the answer, but what are you going to do in order to build upon that? And in Vancouver, a lot of this talk is based on words, right? Retool, rebuild. Jim Benning said a retool. So therefore, that moment when Jim Rutherford uttered those words yet again, what happened? What did people
Trigger warning.
People started losing their minds. They started running for the hills. And It's a different person. It's a different individual. But one thing is for sure, the way that we heard Jim Rutherford, he's not going to be selling everybody on the team for picks. He wants young players. He wants 20-something players. And that may be scary to certain people because, yes, you're not going to start from foundation up. You're not going to start from those two players up. That implies you're going to keep some of these players around. Who deserves to stay right now is the question. That's the big question with this team because they've been so bad this year.
Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes ain't going anywhere. They're untouchables for me The other one that we may have thought was an untouchable going back to last year is Thatcher Demko, the goaltender that played at a Vezina Trophy sort of level last year, ended up getting hurt, had an offseason procedure, gets off to a tough start this year, has another injury, has yet to return, has been out for a while now, and they're still waiting for him to get to quote unquote 110% before he gets back in between the pipes at the NHL level. All well and good. I think you have to make two massive trades here. We know or assume Bo Horvat is going to end up being one of them because of his contract status and where that conversation is going.
And Rutherford said the Canucks took their best shot. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to it with Horvat. But I think Demko might be the other one. And this is just personal opinion. I can see a scenario where Demko is one of those pieces that is able to fetch you a haul. Now, I think you have to be very creative about it. And there's probably only a handful of teams that see themselves as desperate to go out there and get a number one goalie. And it doesn't really compute right now with Demko being injured. But the LA Kings and the New Jersey Devils aren't necessarily in the last year of their window. They're at the beginnings of their window where a top end goaltender worth $5 million per year against the salary cap might be pretty valuable to them. So that's why I see those two teams as ones you can get pretty creative with. Maybe you take a contract back. Maybe you try and take back Cal Peterson to really make the return be quite huge if you're the Vancouver Canucks. That's the creativity. That's the type of bold move the Canucks and Jim Rutherford, Patrick Allvin have to think about.
Yeah, the Cal Peterson contract ain't it, but if I look at that situation with what's gone on with him in LA, do you want that with term coming back your way? Do you want that?
Hey, man,
this is a team that's
the
already...
goalie whisperer. Goalie whisperer. He can fix anybody.
Yeah, we'll see about that. This is a team that is already in a tough situation with cap hits. Do you want potentially another goalie that's playing with the Ontario Reign of the AHL right now as a project for you to, over the next 2 years, build out?
How much are the LA Kings going to sweeten the pot? That's what it's all about. It's not about Cal Peterson, Randip.
But on that, Thatcher Demko, after last year, yes, absolutely. Top 5 goalie in the NHL, book it. This year, that value's dropped. Health matters, and he hasn't been healthy. This is not an ideal time to really take that value out. And I understand with Thatcher Demko, the Canucks are in a good spot because they have some term, but also at the same time, when that contract is up, he's a UFA. So you have to make a decision on him and decide if he's your long-term guy or not. You have to potentially make that trade, or you have to lock him up into his 30s. And that's a very tricky situation. So Dan, I'm with you at some point. This time ain't it, because that value is dropped. He was playing poorly at the beginning of the year. There's health concerns now this year as well. You want him to come back strong and then eventually decide on whether that future lands in Vancouver or not. To saddle him to potentially a bad contract coming back the other way, I think that you're torpedoing value in a top-end goaltender, and don't rush that move. Let it play out. Let him come back healthy next year, and then you deal with it down the road, depending on where this team's at. I would not consider that move right now.
All right, we're going to quickly go through a couple of the other big pieces the Canucks and Jim Rutherford may potentially have to move. The biggest one is Bo Horvat. They've taken their best shot, as Jim Rutherford said the other day. The money's getting a little bit out of hand. Bo wants to go get his, as Jim Rutherford said, and that's his prerogative. Seemed like a bit of interesting choice of words there from the president, but we'll leave that where it was on Monday afternoon. The point is, if you are trading Bo Horvat, this has got to be the home run you hit. You better get the best available package out there for you if you're the Vancouver Canucks.
Yeah, and I think if you're a Canuck fan and you got scared after Rutherford said, hey, players coming off their ELC or on their second contracts, he wasn't talking about Bo Horvat's trade. No. You're looking for a primo prospect. You're looking for primo draft picks in that deal. And listen, we can all discuss and criticize on whether the Canucks made the right move in prioritizing JT Miller before Bo Horvat. I have my views on that, Dan. You know where I stand on that. I think they did make a mistake. However, with the situation and where it stands right now is, there are teams that are going to be in that race to trade for him, whether it's a Colorado Avalanche, whether it's a Boston Bruins who already look so good, or I would also look at the long-term suitors. If the Canucks allow teams to talk to Bo Horvat about an extension, teams like Detroit, teams like maybe even Boston in that regard, depending on what happens with David Krejci, there's going to be a lot of demand out there for a player like Bo Horvat that can play in the playoffs. We've seen him, in that one bubble run where he he can play that role, especially behind a first line center. If he's in that second line center role, he can, I think, thrive, especially in a playoff setting. There will be a lot of demand. That contract is going to be through the roof, but if you're getting him as a rental, that's a win-win situation for me. So the price will be high.
Price is going to be high for Bo. You got to get a primo, probably a center or a right shot D. We know those are the toughest things really to find in the National Hockey League. Okay. The other one is Andrei Kuzmenko. And this is, look, man, I love watching this player, Randip. He is so fun to watch. The way he protects the puck in the offensive zone, the creativity, the way he's able to create space for himself. It's brilliant. And I think he's an incredible find for the Vancouver Canucks. He's played so well. Two things happen when you play as well as he is and the team is where it is in the standings. Price is going up, and given you are in need of extra assets to reinvigorate the rest of the organization, is this not a primo opportunity to get a first round pick? At least the traditional trade deadline type of package, a first round pick and a pretty good prospect in exchange for Andrei Kuzmenko.
Yeah, this is a guy that's putting up points. He's already at 18 goals this year. And if you look at, what he's able to do as an offensive player, he's got flair. He's, to your point, he can play through the neutral zone with speed. He can protect the puck. Now, here's the issue that I see with the Canucks. If you were just making this deal and you were in a competitive window, or at least you thought yourself of a playoff contender for the next year or 2 years, you lock him up. However, we're the Canucks. In the next 2 or 3 years, are they not probably taking a step back to take a step forward? Is that not where we're going with this organization? And is Andrei Kuzmenko
retool, man? Retool.
Yeah,
that's
retool.
What this is about. Retool. You want to be a good team by 24, 25.
Exactly.
Maybe next year's a bit of a wash, but by 24, 25, you want to be back to playoff contention at the very least.
So do you want to lock up a player to a 4 or 5 year deal? Probably looking around, at this point, around $6 million. That is a steep price to pay after 1 year. And I look at this guy and I say two things. Either if he gets his money and he wants a lot of money, like $6 million, which if you look at the production, that's a very difficult situation for the Canucks. You probably want to go younger. You probably want to add maybe that draft pick you're talking about. The other thing is, with the cap probably likely to jump in the next couple of years, Dan, does the player and his agent potentially want to just sign a 1 year deal and say, hey, if the cap's going to jump in 2 years or a year from now, why don't we go for a home run if we know this guy can play in the NHL? So two things to consider there. One from the team perspective, but the other from a player, where the player might take the short-term contract and say, hey, pay me, but I want my money when the cap goes up.
You've got to find out what Andrei Kuzmenko wants before the deadline, and then maybe make your decision from there if you're the Vancouver Canucks. How do you think Jim Rutherford's retool looks? Is it the right way to go for the future of the Vancouver Canucks franchise? Let us know in the comments. We respond to as many as we can. We laugh at some of the comments as well. It's always great entertainment seeing what ends up in the comments section.
We just spend hours upon hours reading the comments, so please comment.
And always subscribe to the Sportsnet channel. We'll see you in next week's video.